Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome. The Broadband Bunch Zero Touch Learning Series is live. I'm Craig Corbin. Thanks so much for joining us today. Today's session, the 18th in our series. It's a one-on-one conversation with Deb Sosha, President and CEO of the Enterprise Center in Chattanooga. Broadband Bunch podcast and Zero Touch Learning Series brought to you by Utopia Fiber, building a more connected nation, by DXTEL, creators of the Harper Broadband Marketing Library, by Calix, the cloud and software platforms to simplify businesses, excite subscribers, and grow value, by ITK, In the Know Solutions Group, process first, technology second, and by your zero-touch automation experts, ETI Software Solutions. Be sure to follow the Broadband Bunch on Twitter at twitter.com/podcast bunch. You can also access Broadband Bunch podcasts on Spotify, Google Podcasts, SoundCloud, Apple Podcasts, Podbean, and on iHeartRadio. A couple of quick reminders before we get started. The session is interactive. If you have questions, we ask that you submit them via the chat function, and our team will be monitoring those throughout the event. The session will also be recorded, and you'll have access to that in the future. Also, we would certainly appreciate you submitting any potential topics for future Zero Touch Learning Series sessions, or if you'd like to suggest prospective panelists, and that can be done again via the chat function. And thanks in advance for your help. Time now to introduce our moderator, a 30-year veteran of the communications industry. Heather Gold is CEO of HBG Strategy and previously served as president and CEO of the Fiber Broadband Association, following her tenure as Senior Vice President of External Affairs and Access Management for XO Communications. She graduated magna cum laude from Tufts University with bachelor's and master's degrees in economics, earned an MBA in finance and marketing from Washington University in St. Louis, and also completed the general management program of the Harvard Business School. Our moderator today, Heather Gold. Heather, it's going to be a fantastic conversation. Can't wait.
I am so excited, and thank you for that introduction, Craig. And
Always.
I am pleased to introduce today's speaker, Deb Sosha, who I have known for several years. Obviously, when you've been in the business as long as I have, you get to meet some wonderful people. And Deb is currently the president and CEO of the Enterprise Center, which is a nonprofit that nurtures innovation in Chattanooga. And I have been there and visited, and it is truly a humming place. But their goal is connecting people to resources and building an inclusive community, mainly on the fiber that Chattanooga built. And she has been great in growing their entrepreneurial system and in the innovation district, which she's going to talk to us about, which is also digital equity and supporting research and implementation of smart cities, which are all part of her purview. Prior to this, I knew Deb when she was executive director of Next Century Cities, which supported communities leaders as they seek to ensure that everyone has access to affordable, fast, and reliable internet. She was also the executive director of the Tech Goes Home program in Boston, whose mission was to also ensure digital equity. So Deb has a great background in digital equity inclusion. I think it prepared her admirably to take on this role in Chattanooga. And Deb, why don't you tell us a little bit about how you got to Chattanooga? Because I think of you as being a real East Coast girl.
It's true. I started initially grew up in Massachusetts, and I was a teacher and a principal for many years. In fact, I ran one of the first one-to-one laptop programs in the country at a middle school, public middle school in Boston. And for me, it was always about equitable access, but not just access, but also outcomes, and making sure that this great resource, technology and online access, was available to everyone. And so as a principal, we adapted a program that existed in Boston called Tech Goes Home, grew it into our own program, and then got a stimulus grant during the Obama years to take it to a much larger level, which we did. Eventually, by the way, it came here to Chattanooga, and I actually get to be a part of Tech Goes Home again, so it's kind of neat. But what I learned during the project working on Tech Goes Home was that access was not just a factor of whether it was available and it was inexpensive, but it's all about where you live, right? In these rural communities and the redlined communities in urban settings were not getting the kinds of broadband opportunities that other people were. And that's why I was the founding director for Next Century Cities. At this point in my career, I'm coming toward the end of my career. I wanted to be in a project that saw local outcomes, right? What happens in a neighborhood, in a community when you get to participate in bringing new resources. So that's why I'm here in Chattanooga. I'd visited a lot, always thought I'd retire here, and I got here before retirement.
And you're in a fabulous location. So I am going to let you go and tell us about the Enterprise Center.
Thanks, Heather. So, our job is really to unite people, organizations, technology to build an advanced and inclusive future for our community. And that has us working on 3 very distinct pillars. One is the Smart Community Collaborative, which I'll talk more in depth about in a little bit, but it's really about what are the smart applications that can really improve quality of life. And then I work on the Innovation District here. We have under our organization, the Director of Innovation District Programming. Again, it's about bringing people together, connecting, collaborating, building networks, and supporting entrepreneurs. And then we also run the Tech Goes Home program, which I mentioned a few minutes ago. So Tech Goes Home is our digital inclusion program. It provides 15 hours of digital skills training. We have a whole buffet of resources. So if you're working with seniors, it's going to be a different program than if you're working with parents of preschoolers. So we have a wide variety of curriculum choices. During the pandemic, we all know it really returned to a place where we needed telehealth, we needed to learn, work, shop from home. And we found there are a lot more people disconnected than we ever could have imagined. And so our organization has pivoted a lot. The word of the pandemic is pivot. We have done a lot of changes in order to reach those folks. For example, people who are undergoing recovery services like Alcoholics Anonymous or Narcotics Anonymous, people who are trying to attend church. There just was this huge empty void and we needed to jump in and fill it. And so we've worked really hard at that. During the program, you get those 15 hours of training, you get a new Chromebook computer, you get help to get the lowest cost available home access. We do it a lot during out of school time programming and supporting those out of school time programs with technology and training, a lot with faith-based and nonprofits. And we have done an enormous amount with seniors, including installing some telehealth technology in some of the senior centers in our region.
Deb, before you go on, I just wanted to get a couple of clarifying questions on, first of all, how did the Enterprise System Center come to be? And then what led to its deployment? And then the next thing is, when you talk about digital inclusion in Chattanooga, how are the numbers not connected fairly high, even in an all fiber community? So 2 questions there.
Gotcha. Absolutely. The Enterprise Center, interestingly enough, used to be an organization that managed large transit projects, right? So when the federal dollars came down, they would come through the Enterprise Center, they would manage the project and manage the funding. That funding pretty much dried up about 8 or 10 years ago. And so when they were looking for a way to bring these resources and opportunities to the Innovation District and to Chattanooga, they rewrote the mission and the vision and got it approved, and we just shifted it to work on these issues. Not different, we're still looking at pathways, but the pathways are no longer streets, though we work on that too, but they are really about broadband options, right? The fiber has changed the way people communicate and the way people use technology to get their needs met. On what was your other question, Heather? I've forgotten already.
How severe is the digital inclusion problem in Chattanooga? I guess most of us think you put in fiber to the home and it's solved.
Gotcha. Yeah, absolutely. It has been a problem here. In fact, in 2016, we were on the National Digital Inclusion Alliance's list of the 100 worst connected cities. We were 14th. We were 44% disconnected at that point. In 2019, we were 15% disconnected and 188th on the list. So we've made progress, and in the last 2 years, we've made an enormous amount of progress. There are a few issues that are causing that problem. The biggest one is really cost. It's affordability. Within Hamilton County and Chattanooga and the footprint of the broadband provider, which is EPB, the Electric Power Board, it's a municipal provider, but within their footprint, due to a state law, they are not allowed to provide service to anyone for less than it costs them to provision it. So the lowest they could charge was $29, which is more than most folks could pay who were on a limited income. And so it's been a challenge. And I will be talking in a few minutes about some of the things we've done recently to really change that. But it's a great question. You would think that Chattanooga would have 100% connected folks, right? So here is our one of the big projects we worked on during the pandemic, and we worked with EPB, with Hamilton County Public Schools, local philanthropy, Blue Cross Blue Shield of Tennessee. And so we wanted, first of all, to find a short-term solution for the folks who, on March 13th, no longer had access to learn or work from home. And so we initially put in Quick Connect, which is 110 Wi-Fi hotspots free to the public around the city. We used a lot of data to look at where those hotspots should go, laundromats, housing authority, where are the places we know people might connect to the internet. And that we have had terabytes of data used since they were installed. So it's been amazing. But that's still a short-term solution. It gets really hot here in the summer. There's no way folks can be sitting outside, and there's a line of sight issue with these hotspots. So we looked for a more long-term solution, and the city and the county and the school department and EPB all got together, and we have created something that's called EdConnect, HCS EdConnect, powered by EPB. We are connecting 27,500 students who receive free and reduced lunch to 100 megabits symmetrical at no cost to the family for the next 10 years. And the way we did that is we raised money that could make sure that we were not creating a cost above what it costs to provision it. So we are in the process of doing that. We've already connected close to 50% of those students. And as the new year has begun, the new school year has begun, we're working on that again. So and the funding, go ahead.
I was just going to ask, how is it managed? Is it a separate organization, or is it under the enterprise system? And, how do you track it? And, has government tried to put its sticky fingers into how it's the oversight?
The good news is it has been a great collaboration. No one person owns it. We do a lot of the back-end data and management, and we write the quarterly reports that go out to everybody that's involved, but it's a collaboration. It requires a lot of people to make this work. And the city and the county have been amazing partners, and EPB has been fabulous to work with. So we've been able to do a lot of the back-end data management, helping the city and helping the county and the school department with their data. But it's really been such a good collaboration and a good partnership.
Great.
So the next area, really, economic and workforce deployment ends up falling into our purview as well. And so I wanted to talk just a moment about the value of the fiber to Chattanooga. So Dr. Bento Lobo from the University of Tennessee, Chattanooga, engaged in research at the 10-year anniversary of the fiber being provided to the city. And his economic impact numbers were $2.7 billion in the first 10 years. It was an amazing study that was really helpful. And, you know, they save money on things like decreasing how long folks have their power out, right? Because we have smart grids and opportunities to really improve service, and that saves money. In helping so many of the folks here find pathways to jobs, it's been just fabulous.
And
So, yeah, go ahead.
did Professor Lobo's work actually identify the types of jobs that were being created in Chattanooga? Are they higher salaried or more tech than we would expect in other places, or did he not get into that level of minutia?
Yeah, I think that I'm not certain that he went to that level, but in terms of the kinds of jobs that have become available because of the fiber, certainly we became a hub for where entrepreneurs locate, right? And when entrepreneurs co-locate, like they did in Chattanooga, it creates new opportunities for everyone. Organizations like Bellhops and Gestamp and VW are here, right? Most of them came because of the availability of fiber. But then we need to provide a workforce that actually meets their needs. And so what has happened here is we've created opportunities to match the need. So we're using data. It's all about the data, right? What kind of jobs are out there? We are a logistics hub here in Chattanooga. That north-south route comes right through here. Many logistics companies have located here. So we really want to focus a lot on supporting the needs of that logistics industry. And right now, that's CDL licensure, right? It's a huge issue. At some of our plants like VW, it's about working in a manufacturing job and having skills that'll help you do that. For some of this, we obviously have what a lot of cities have, and that is a need for more trained technicians and computer scientists. So we're really ramping up our efforts on the workforce support side and helping to do two things. One, bring folks here who have the skills we need, but in my opinion, more importantly, growing the skills of the people who are here so they can take a job that has a living wage, right? How are we making sure folks are getting a living wage? We're also working on this idea of folks with disabilities in the workplace, and the importance of thinking differently about how people apply, how people engage, where they work, what they do, and can we think of ways to employ more of our folks who have an identified disability? So, and I have linked here the resiliency checklist, and I'll tell you what it is. We recognize that our small businesses were struggling through the pandemic. It's not a surprise. But what we recognized was a lot of them were unable to apply for the PPP loans, primarily because they didn't have their data together. They didn't have their information. They didn't have had forgotten to update a business license or something. And so this resiliency checklist helps people figure out what they need and how to get it. And it is open and free to anyone. And so folks could contact me and I can get you the back end of this. Right now it is focused on our region, but it would be very simple to change it so folks could focus on their own region. Okay, so Innovation District. So the Innovation District is about 6 years old. It is within a walking radius right around the building where I am. It's about 140 acres. And again, it's about creating opportunities for people to connect, collaborate, network. And it's all about finding ways to get people together. So I'm going to tell you briefly about the Edney Innovation Center because it's kind of a neat building. And that's where I am right now. When you walk in the door, on the first floor is CoLab. CoLab is an entrepreneurial support program that helps people build strong entrepreneurial skills and to start new organizations. Then above them is Society of Work. Society of Work is a co-working space. We also have the University of Tennessee Chattanooga's downtown campus in our building. We have the city's IT department, and we have our floor. And our floor is the entire floor, 5th floor of the Edney building. where we actually have event space. It's been sad not to have so many people recently as we've had in the past, but we are starting to build that back up. But the nice thing about having a free meeting space is that if you are an entrepreneur and you're new and you don't have a place to meet with your bankers, we've got a place for you. If you want to share what's going on with your new business and get people together, we got a place for you. If you just need a place to sit and work with good internet access, we got a place for you too. And so we've become sort of that cool place to come when you need to connect and collaborate.
So let's go back a little bit and talk about some of the things you're doing with job training and the enterprise. You know, what determines who helps inform you on what jobs you should be focused on training? And then do you have goals in terms of numbers, or, you know, what's success look like in that process?
Right. In terms of success, it really is about the percentage of folks we're training actually ending up in a position, right? And we're starting this with the end in mind. So we're going to the employers first and saying, if we provide this training, will you hire these folks? And so in a lot of cases, this is really being driven mostly by Chattanooga State. And they have been an amazing partner. So, but they are doing a lot of the research as well. But we're really looking at what are the jobs that are open. And we're talking to employers and saying, you know, what are your needs and how can we help you provide that? And a lot of these trainings that we're doing, for example, CDL or manufacturing, up front in those programs, we're providing a Tech Goes Home program. So folks are getting a computer and some training right up front so that their learning can be online and can continue when they get home.
Okay, and I just want to remind the audience that we are accepting questions through the question box. So if you have any for Deb, to please jump in. When we go back and look at your neighborhood there, what sort of determined the parameters where the enterprise zone was located, and what are some of the benefits of being involved in that innovation district, if you will?
Yeah, it's interesting. It was never meant to be a really definitive line. It's a circle for a reason. And, you know, the United Way, for example, is just across the street from the line. And they said, can we be innovation district? Of course you can. This is an inclusive process, not an exclusive process. But it's a lot focused on the downtown area. It is really a very active place. And so we wanted to make sure that that activity drew a lot of those folks who are working in the innovation space. And it's been pretty successful at that.
Are there particular buildings or availability outside of your building that would entice people to come there, to headquarter there, or to open an office there?
I think there are. You know, some of our logistics industry folks told me that they wouldn't consider going outside of the downtown region primarily because their young staff really wants to be where the action is, right? There are coffee shops, there are outdoor venues, there's live music. There's live music on Miller Park, which is just across the street from us every Friday night, and it's free. And there's a pavilion, an inside-outside kind of pavilion that the doors open, and we have events there all the time. We have taken over some of the alleyways, like Cooper's Alley, and in those spaces, we bring in events and live music and silent discos. And so really trying to think of ways to make it the cool place to be has really paid off. We had a lot of vacant storefronts, and we still have some, but we're seeing some really increase in who's working and providing services here, and that's been really helpful.
And then if you didn't tell us earlier, what kind of work is the EDNI Innovation Center doing?
Well, it is a building, and it hosts, I mean, we all lease space here. And together we work on events within our building and outside our building. So it's really more of a, it's the name of our building, but not really an entity.
And I have a question. And I have a question from Rick Usher, who you may remember from Kansas City. And thank you, Rick. Is there a Tech Goes Home for emerging entrepreneurs and small business owners who find themselves struggling without the internet?
Well, now it's really interesting you asked that, Rick, because you know I'm not going to let folks not have internet that need it. And so, yes, we have a small business version of Tech Goes Home, and we have a version that supports all kinds of innovators and entrepreneurs, including our creative community. Especially in the pandemic, if you are an artist, how do you sell your wares? If you are a poet, how do you make money? If you are a musician, how do you manage? So we ran a Tech Goes Home for creatives as well as Tech Goes Home for small businesses. And that has been really helpful. The other thing I'd say is that a lot of these folks didn't have the skills or the device or the access. And so we really worked on making sure they had all three. For a lot of our faith-based organizations, which are indeed a small business here, we helped them get online, taught them how to use Facebook Live, taught them how to collect donations, gave them a device, gave them, in some cases, a hotspot. The challenge here was not just the pandemic, but we also had a tornado come through. And so we were dealing with just people had lost their business entirely, and then people whose business was not typically online, helping them shift to online. So that was an incredibly busy time for us. And thanks, Rick, for the question.
Good question there. Okay.
So this is our Smart Community Collaborative. We really focus on three areas: energy, healthcare, and transportation. And these are some of the partners. There's a lot of partners that work together on this. And again, you know, we convene the meeting, but we don't run the meeting, right? It is a community collaborative for a reason. And so we work together to think about the kinds of projects that we want to see that will improve quality of life. So I'll give you an example of one. UTC is pretty amazing to work with, and Dr. Mina Sartipi is fabulous, very creative and wonderful. So she worked with the city of Chattanooga on a transportation project, and she uses predictive analytics to be able to know where, she looked at 911 data, lots of data, where there might be a crash, an accident on a Thursday afternoon at 4 o'clock in the rain. And she's pretty good at telling you where they might be, which means we can then intervene either by changing that intersection or potentially reallocating resources to help with that. Another example of one of the things we did is we have a fully sensorized 1.5 miles in downtown Chattanooga on Martin Luther King Boulevard. It's ready for use for, you know, pilot projects, to try out an automated vehicle, to take a look at data. And it's just been a really amazing boon. And what's interesting about it is we had applied for a grant to do this project, and we didn't get the grant. But like a lot of you will know, when you don't get the grant, but you talked about it so much, you want to figure out a way to make it happen anyway, and we did. So we were able to raise enough money to purchase what we needed in terms of the equipment. The city provided their trucks to help place. The enterprise centers supplied some technical support. UTC managed all the data. EPB made sure we had electricity and fiber to the data center at UTC. I mean, getting all these folks together on a regular basis to talk has turned, sorry, my apologies, has turned into such an absolutely wonderful opportunity to work together. And you know, yeah, go ahead.
I know you say it's collaborative, but who drives the bus?
Do
they elect a chairperson or?
No, we don't have a chairperson, but I think the driver of the bus tends to be the right person for the particular project, right? If the project's going to be about data and data analytics, it's definitely going to be UTC, right? If it's going to be healthcare, it's more likely to be Erlanger or Siskin, right? If it's energy, it's likely to be EPB. But what I think has been amazing is this group has collaborated on a bunch of grants. And we've actually brought to Chattanooga about $115 million worth of grants since we got the fiber. That's a lot of money in grants for a small city. A lot of it has really helped us in terms of research. I think the other thing about our data piece here is that we actually don't collect video data. We don't do facial recognition or license plate recognition. It was a promise we made to the community that our projects will help our community and not harm our community. And so we've been really cautious about that. And there's a lot of edge computing happening where that video turns into data. So the only thing the police get is really spot shotter data, right? So, and that's exactly what a shot spotter is for, right? Is for people to be able to see where there might have been gunfire. Other than that, the police do not get our data. So it's been interesting.
Interesting. Good.
Okay, so I'm going to talk a little bit about what we learned. You know, folks say to me all the time, you know, how did you get to do this thing like EdConnect? And really the time to build partnerships and collaboration is before you need them and not in that moment. So there's a lot of money coming out of the federal government right now. It would behoove us all to have strong community connections and relationships with government, nonprofits, universities, and business. And so building the collaboration and the trust up front makes it possible to do everything else. The other thing I'd say is dream big, right? Don't start with a project that's tiny. Dream big. Go for the big projects and see what you can do. I think that we often do not go forward with a big project out of fear of failure. I think the truth is it's okay to fail because when you fail, you learn too. I think go ahead. Did you have a question,
No,
Heather?
not yet.
Okay. So the next thing I'd say is think regionally, and really EPB's footprint is larger than the city of Chattanooga. It moves into the county of Hamilton County, and we have some really rural areas. And so thinking about how the kinds of efforts we put forth will impact not just the folks in the more urban parts of our community, but the folks in the more rural parts of our community. And how are we thinking about supporting folks in rural areas? And how do we build a stronger region? When our former mayor, Andy Burke, would always say, Chattanooga doesn't want to be an island, right? We want to be a continent. We want to include everybody around us because we are stronger when we all have those resources. You know, one of the other things which we alluded to a little bit earlier was who gets the credit, right? So how do you do these projects and how do you manage who gets the credit? I regularly, as do all the partners that we work with, talk about it as a partnership. And we really are careful not to take individual credit, but to make it a collective credit. And I forget who said this quote, but it's amazing what you can accomplish when you don't care who gets the credit. I think that's very true. If our end result goal is to have a better quality of life for the people who live in our region, then I shouldn't care who gets the credit. And so thinking about it along those lines has helped us to really build a stronger collaboration and also has helped us with the trust, right? Building trust. And then focusing on outcomes. For me, I've read a lot of grants, been on a lot of committees to select grantees. I think it's lovely when you say, you know, we want to give opportunities to these 100 people, but what I really want to know is, how is that going to change their quality of life? I want to know the outcome. It's not enough to give an opportunity. There has to be a pathway to an outcome. And so really focusing on the outcomes. So for our Ed Connect project, focusing on 27,500 children being connected. It's a big project, and we are focused on making that happen. And it's interesting because they spent a lot of last year sort of virtual in and out based on where COVID was. And in Chattanooga and Hamilton County, our data actually went up last year, which I don't think there are a lot of communities that can say that. But because we were able to get so many children connected and provide the quick connect hotspots, we actually were able to improve our outcomes for our students. So, and the final one here is identify the glue. So I was at a conference. It was a very interesting conference, and there, sitting on one side of the room was the mayor of County A, City A, and sitting on the other side of the room was a university located in his city. The mayor was complaining that the university was not participating, and the university was complaining that the mayor wasn't participating. Where's the glue that gets these together and builds collaborations and communication? A lot of our partners here in Chattanooga call us the glue. So we end up being that partner that can run to the mayor's office, run over here, run over there, bring people together. It's a lot like Casey Digital Drive, Rick, from Kansas City, right? It's the glue. It's the person that can sort of be more facile and get here and there and make things connect and run over here with a hotspot and run over there with a permit. I think that it really does help to have an organization that plays that role.
So what kind of governing structure does that bring? And, how do you use it? And then how does that determine what new projects you take on or not?
Yeah, the projects are mostly determined by the collaborative that we're working on with at that moment, like the Ed Connect group, which is different from the Smart City Collaborative. We really work together to look at all the opportunities and select the ones that make the most sense. We try not to compete against ourselves in grants, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
We try instead to add value by working collaboratively and finding a role for everybody. I think to a certain extent, we're the group that makes sure everybody does their part of the grant application and make sure everybody meets where they need to meet and provides, all the information they need to provide in order to get that grant in. We are often the one doing the submitting of the grant, if that makes sense. And then we are often the one doing the reporting, depending, right? Like UTC has their own department for that, and they're quite capable of managing it on their own. It's a challenge sometimes to determine which one of the collaborative is actually going to take point, only because it involves things like who is willing to do the back end budget efforts regarding a federal grant, right? Do you have the capacity to manage a federal grant? And so that will opt in some folks and opt out others. So looking at all of the expectations of the grant itself and the processing of the grant and the management of the back end audit and so forth really matters when you come to determine who's going to own that grant, if that all makes sense.
It does. So you sort of have like a web, and depending on what's needed, an arm of the web goes out and takes responsibility. We have a question here from Josh Williams, who's with Fuse and the City of Houston. And he's asking you, how important was it to have transportation join the collaborative? Also, did you experience any barriers when forming the collaboration? And do you want Josh to identify which of your many collaborations he's speaking about?
Josh, I'm going to guess it's the Smart Community Collaborative. Is that accurate?
Yes. Exclamation point.
Yeah. Transportation for us is huge for a lot of reasons. I mean, it's big in a lot of places, and certainly in Texas, it's a big issue because when you're in the rural parts of the state, you certainly have to be able to get to the more urban parts of the state. We have that same issue here, right? We have jobs available, but can people get there? So we work with the local transportation, CARTA it's called, to talk about how we manage to get people who need the jobs to where the jobs are. But we also talk about it in the much bigger picture, transportation in terms of managing accidents, managing pedestrians, ensuring safety, and then in terms of the logistics industry, since we have such a big role here around that. It was actually a huge priority for us, and it was established prior to my coming here, because I've been here 2 years. It was established as one of the 3 important areas of focus for that collaboration, specifically because of those issues.
Okay. So let's talk about where you go next.
Okay. So, for us, workforce development is a bit of a newer endeavor, and we are ramping up pretty seriously. I spoke today with one of our largest employers about what their employment needs are. And in fact, one of the conversations was about transportation. And if transportation is a barrier to them hiring and a barrier to our residents being employed, we need to find a solution to that, right? Training is also often a barrier, and Chattanooga State is a great partner for that. And we are, one of the positive things about the Enterprise Center is because of Tech Goes Home in particular, we're a pretty trusted entity in the community. And so when we need community input, we know how to get there. So that's been a really helpful part of the project in terms of building strong workforce development opportunities, especially in the areas that have been underserved by those trainings. Additionally, just really thinking about how do we support the region as a whole? How do we work in both the rural and urban areas and provide resources and opportunities that can go beyond the border of our city and county? Telehealth has been a really huge one for us. We are putting a lot of focus on that right now. In particular, thinking about how do we help folks age at home? How do we help folks in rural communities where many of the healthcare organizations have shut down? Rather than having to drive for an hour to get to a hospital or a doctor's office, can we provide a telehealth option? Of course, that means you got to have broadband, right? And you have to have some kind of training in a device. So we're working on that. Any smart application that will improve quality of life, we're really looking at right now. What I tell folks is, I don't really want the shiny new project or product. What I want is something that's actually going to matter. So that has been an interesting challenge, because I'm sure you all get a lot of phone calls from folks who want to sell you something, but it's more than just that one shiny thing. There has to be some way that it's interconnecting with other things we're working on that we also need. Sorry about that.
That's all right.
The one thing about Chattanooga that's interesting is allergy season is all year. So,
well, everybody's allergy season has been abysmal this year, just awful. So I totally understand. Do we have any other questions from the audience? Deb, this has just been so interesting. I think it's very valuable for people to understand that all of this has been enabled by the fact that EPB deployed all that fiber. And that, this is really a testament to what happens to a community's economic development and economic base when there is that provision of fiber to all of its citizens, and the fiber they need, not what some provider decides that they want to provide. So I think that's very important, and I'm glad that we were able to have this conversation with you. And I'm just looking to see if we have any more questions. I think you've answered a lot of them. Oh, there it is. So do we have?
I would say,
go ahead.
I would say EPB has been an amazing partner, right? To them, it's not about so much, of course, they are doing very well with their broadband and electrical grid, but profit sometimes is a different thing when you're a municipal entity, right?
Right.
Profit can be economic development, it can be tourism, it can be so many things. And EPB is an amazing, innovative partner. And for those of you who've worked with municipal utilities, you know, a lot of times they're not on the innovative side, right? This is an innovative utility, and they are willing to try new things. They're willing to work on projects that maybe another utility might not try. But we love to work with them because they're such a good partner.
Yeah, it's been incredible what they've done for Chattanooga. I think, like I said, a real testament to other communities around the country. I just think it's a wonderful example. Well, I am going to wrap this up. I'll have Craig jump back in, but Deb, this has been great. I know that I will run into you again shortly, probably in about 2 weeks in Houston.
In
And
Houston.
yeah, so Josh, we hope we might see you at Broadband Communities. I want to thank everyone who listened in, but particularly thank Deb. You're doing great work at the Enterprise Center. And as usual, you are leading the charge for better broadband for all of us. So thank you.
You're very kind. I'll just say I'm one of the partners. How's that? So
Well,
Very
and
much.
so impressive, Deb, to learn everything that's going on there. I was very intrigued with the digital skills training because digital literacy is such a big part of what is in need across the country. And I can't wait to see in person the Edney Innovation Center. That just sounds like a phenomenal center there. By the way, a little tidbit. I love the quote. It's amazing what you can accomplish if you don't care who gets the credit. That was courtesy of our 33rd president, Harry Truman. So there's your little tidbit for
thank
the
you.
day. This has been great. We want to thank everyone who has been a part of this, and thanks to Mary Beth Henderson for running the show behind the scenes. The Broadband Bunch Zero Touch Learning Series brought to you by Utopia Fiber, DXTEL, Calix, ITK, and ETI Software Solutions. Ladies, great conversation. Thank you so much. We thank everyone for letting us be a part of your day, and we'll see you next time right here on the Broadband Bunch Zero Touch Learning Series. So long, everyone.
Bye.